Hi, I'm Dr. Alexandra Elnitsky, and I'm in San Diego at DDW 2016 at the CARE program, and I presented abstracts that addressed gastroparesis, which remains a very difficult problem for our patients, and the gastroelectrical stimulation device Intera, which was introduced to our market in 2000, to the US market, has not met the expectations that the product had hoped to. Therefore, we are looking at different paradigms as to how the gut can be stimulated with different electrical patterns that may bring about better clinical responses. I think at the same time we have to recognize that it's an inherently difficult condition to study, and there are many fundamental problems in the actual design of the research study that have to be addressed before we can look at the finer details of electrical paradigms. One of them being, whether patients can, for instance, be truly blinded to electrical stimulation. And this is brought out in an abstract where a researcher has looked at the adverse events that people are reporting with an Intera system. And interestingly, a significant number of the reports pertain to patients stating that they were feeling shocks. And this has been something that's always hovered over the GESS data, and that is whether you can really blind people. And I really do hope that someone takes this question on and addresses it, because it's such a fundamental question that needs an answer before we can do good quality research in the area. On a more hopeful side, I see that our drug therapies that we're looking at, we're beginning to get more specific in trying to understand what the mechanism of action might be, and at the same time trying to perhaps be more sophisticated in understanding what the mechanism of the disorder might be in any specific patient. There are abstracts looking at prucalopride and demonstrating that it's increasing antral activity, and if we could determine that in any given particular patient that is the mechanism of dysfunction that's generating their dyspeptic or gastroparetic symptoms, perhaps then that'll move us forward to a trial where prucalopride would be applied in that patient population. So the developments in gastroparesis continue to be slow, but I think that we're seeing some movement, at least into an area that may lead to significant benefits with time. The other abstracts that I have found of importance to us is the ones on FODMAP, the low FODMAP diet. It's been highly advocated in clinical practice based on data demonstrating benefit in subsets of patients with irritable bowel syndrome, yet we don't have an understanding of how these diets work. There's some very interesting studies being done, and one is by Dr. Vanner and other colleagues in Canada. So Dr. Vanner's work that he's presenting at this study, Dr. Vanner's work that's being presented at this meeting is trying to determine what might it be that a low FODMAP diet is changing in the IBS sufferer that is giving the patient the benefit. And a wide net is cast measuring a variety of biological markers, and the conclusion at the end of the day is that we don't really know. We need to be doing more work, and it's early days, I think, with trying to understand how a low FODMAP diet works. There are many other abstracts that try to address this, and perhaps the most conclusive one is an abstract that explores whether the endotoxin produced by bacteria, which is demonstrated to be higher in patients that have IBS-D, that these patients, if we take the stool from them with this endotoxin and inject it into the animal, the model that we classically have used to study IBS, that we can demonstrate that these animals then demonstrate more visceral motor responsiveness, and they have changes in their intestinal permeability. This fits into the model that we have used extensively in studying IBS, and remains, I think, hopeful that this might lead to better understanding of what it is within the altered stool of the IBS sufferer that causes the IBS symptoms. But the question still remains as to how can we, in a long-term sustained way, change this so-called dysbiosis in the gut of the IBS sufferer. In my own view, I don't think that it'll be through a dietary intervention, as this is a very difficult thing to sustain long-term. So I look forward to more work along this concept of altering the dysbiosis through intervening on the microbiome, and I think future work is going to go into that direction and perhaps provide us with some answers.